One air, good morning, good afternoon for some of us already. Welcome to the largest and fastest growing and the oldest large-scale Scrum meetup global community based out of New York City, these days global. Thank you all for joining. We shall be hosting this discussion today around, so we're going to be basing this on system thinking. And as I'm sure you know, that system thinking is a big foundation for in large-scale Scrum, system thinking and organizational design. Those are the two big chevrons that we always remind people of. I will not be giving you system thinking 101. Presumably, many of you have experience either reading or even practicing it. And by the way, I kindly ask you to keep keep your cameras on and the mics off if you don't mind. So the only thing I'll do, I will dive right into this and we'll give you a simple example of a system model. And then once we get comfortable, it's a refresher. Once we do that, I'm going to shift gears and we'll spend more time discussing the main topic of today's session. That would be Madeline, I'm asking you, and John, please mute. I'm going to be spending time discussing how HR norms and policies and budget and finance interact and have impact on product centricity and product focus. And here we go. So let's take a look at the first example. So this is a simple version of a system model. And I am going to start this conversation by paraphrasing. So imagine I had a boss, I had a manager who had a goal in mind. We need to increase feature velocity. And this goal was translated to me, a developer, but also to my team, a team of developers. So of course, if this was the goal coming from my boss, it would translate onto me as a pressure to try actions for high velocity. So we all have been there, and one way or the other, whether we developed or saw others develop. So if this is the case, and by the way, those items, we call these sticky system variables, as a reminder. Those system variables that we wish to decrease in the system because we don't like them, that we don't think they're good ones. I personally, this is my personal approach, color coding them in red. It's bias because I don't like them to be high. If you like them to be high, you may color code them something else. So ask me more about color coding if you want. So pressure to try actions for high velocity. Eventually, it's going to drive our velocity high. And if I were to ask you, what's the miracle that makes it happen? What would you answer? I mean, what's the easiest way to increase your velocity? Short answer.
Story points inflation.
Increase the number.
I heard of inflation, numbers inflation. Kasia, thank you. Kasha, who else said something? David?
Oh, I said increase the number. I don't know if you heard that.
Yeah, Vincent. So yeah, if you will do something. We all are humans. We know how to fudge numbers. So feature velocity will naturally grow, and our managers will be probably, oh, wow, great. Used to be a 3-story pointer, now it's a 5-story pointer. Now, as we know, I'm sure many of us drive. If you drive on a highway, the faster you go, if you hit a bunch of road bumps, speed bumps, it's going to be faster that you're going to encounter those bumps. Boom, 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 boom. So more high velocity, more bugs. That's another probabilistic but strong probability there. And that's the opposite loop, right? Negative feedback loop. The number of bugs increases. It will slow down our velocity. If we have a high number of low-skill developers, so this is just a number, neutral variable. If we increase the number of low-skill developers, inevitably the feature velocity is going to drop. So this is the small as short annotation here. Oh, opposite. Here up above, and by the way, I'm not concerned at the moment with some of these areas that go outside into the bigger system. I'm just focusing on this little part. Once my boss passes on this goal of his or hers, immediately I'm going to come up with my own, right? So I have my own goal. I work for a large investment bank or an insurance company. And I have my own goal to get more rewards. So I can tell you, I have probably some ethics in other dimensions of my life, but I won't be that ethical when it comes to numbers gaming. And I don't think anyone here would be stopped if they could secure more, discretionary rewards. We all are humans. We all would be, one way or the other, obviously or not so obviously, pressured into gaming numbers to look good on paper, to produce better metrics. And surprisingly, the higher the value of reward, the more pressure we're going to get. So the value we put on reward, monetary value, is going to increase pressure to game numbers as well as pressure to have high velocity. I am going to trace this down further systemically. If I have higher pressure, if I'm under pressure to game numbers, then the degree of measurement dysfunction will grow. It's another way of saying your system of measurements and metrics will be totally unreliable. So you're going to be introducing more unreliability, more variance, more variability into your system. And of course, it's going to have an opposite effect on your ability to guide and improve the system. Another way of saying, I guess, a delicate way of saying, you take a rich in metrics PowerPoint report to your CIO, look at it and say, oh, wow, that's great. Great numbers, great report. But if it came through the system that was based on this, it's full of water and crap, quite honestly. So relying on this in a report would be somewhere, naive. So this is just an example of a refresher. Ask me questions. We can ask questions about the dynamic, but also about the technique. So we're going to be shifting gears. I'm assuming that what we discussed is the common sense from most of us. And also, hopefully you remember that system modeling that is used to help us with system thinking is just a way to improve our ability, to increase our ability to have a valuable conversation. So it helps our conversation, not substitutes it.
Got a quick question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
What is green for you on the board?
Good question. So again, super biased and may not recommend using color coding. I sometimes keep them blank, like all of them are white or gray or transparent. But to me, anything that I would like to see increase in the system, like the good boys versus the bad boys. Green is something I would like to increase. It's a visual. It gets my attention, my eyes. So I would like to have my system being reliable, my measurement system. So ability to guide and improve the system is a good thing. But it will be decreased, the opposite, by the degree of measurement dysfunction.
Makes sense. Thank you very much.
There's I hear people sometimes saying, don't use color coding for this, use for something else. It's the way to help ourselves to have a conversation. It was Vincent with a hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Gene. Hey, I'm looking at the balancing loop down where you have the number of defects, and I can follow the number of defects as far as those go up, the feature velocity goes down. And I'm not a fan of velocity, but how is that a strong correlation? The fact that just purely feature velocity goes up, that number of defects goes up.
Well, I guess it goes back to maybe, so this one of the examples where, although it feels good, but maybe it's not common sense for everyone, to everyone. So if velocity is high, and let's just understand that this is coming from the pressure of having more velocity, then developers would be trying to create an illusion of higher output. So we'll be trying to code faster and deliver more. More doesn't mean better. Faster doesn't mean better. So output presumably may look good, but outcome not necessarily. So to get a more product backlog items from to do to whip to done, that's on their radar. That's what they want to do, because that assumes you got through your workflow, you got it to done, your velocity will go up because you're going to claim a credit for those delivered items. However, because of high speed and because of compromising quality, you will have more problems in the system. So it's not deterministic causation. It's probabilistic.
Gotcha. Okay.
And in organizational structures where more means better, it is often the case. So, deterministic would be something else, like a deterministic or definitional causation would be something like this. Value of a story point goes up, velocity goes down, which means if you give more value to a story point, then having 5 story points will give you so much more value. So you're going to deliver only 5 story points worth of work. If you estimate this in 6 story points, then 5 items like this are going to produce the velocity of 30. So on paper, it's going to look like, oh, bigger number, but the same amount of work. So that's deterministic or definitional, I call it. This is a probabilistic. And it could be weak or strong probability. Thank you for the question, by the way. So let's dive into the, so where do I start? With the system model, really doesn't matter where you start because it's all systemic, but I'll start with budgeting. So again, some of these areas will point out and I will further take us, I'll later take us there, but let's just start from here, from this one system variable called likelihood of funding a product. So we are, again, we're in product-centric business. We are trying to satisfy our customer. We are really customer focused. We are thinking of a product and our customer every day. So we want to fund the product because products make us money. So we need to fund them. So if this variable goes up, likelihood of funding product teams that actually work on a product front to back long term, it will also go up. Also, ability to move away from year-end budgets towards dynamic budgeting, so rolling wave, is going to go up. From here, I'm kind of bifurcating, and there are different ways to think about this. First, I'll take care of this, and then we'll look at something else. So if your ability to move away from year-end budgets goes up, so if your ability is high, then your dependency on cascading top-down traditional fixed everything year-end budgeting will be less of. Just makes sense, right? Here at the same time, we're saying that dependency on funding portfolios, programs, and projects will be lower because you're funding products, right? Orthogonal in some way. So products is what customers buy and use. Projects, programs, portfolios is our internal arbitrary way of packaging work, so not the same. This variable will also have positive causation on this dependency. So this goes up, this goes up. As this goes up, we're going to have more urgency to spend budget by year end. And those of you that have been around budgets, you can tell me. If you don't use the remaining $300,000 in year 2021, and you are in November, what's going to happen in 2022? You will lose it. You will lose it. You'll lose it. You're not going to get it. So you will you will be urged to spend it. So you will piss it away. How? Buy expensive equipment you may not need. Have a very expensive Christmas party beyond what you need. So you're going to probably do something else, perhaps. You're going to do some less than thoughtful hiring. And I've seen companies doing this. Oh, we need to. Why would you hire someone at the end of the year? Usually people say frozen budget, nothing else, but you actually have budget that you're hiring. I mean, how do you know what you're doing everything else in a very traditional way? So you're planning as of January 1st, yet you are hiring people in November and you don't even know whether or not you will need them. Well, guess what? It's another way to spend money. But because you are, so you have urgency to hire. And if this goes high, you will not do as much vetting for quality. We just need bodies to staff, just to create an illusion we burn cash. So the quality of candidate selection process is going to be low. So you're not going to be as thorough selecting the best of the best. And I'm kind of giving a sneak peek. These two. Oh, another thing. If you are hard locked into, I don't know, HR driven, I guess, but definitely HR controlled hiring rates, you can spend more money on an XYZ level developer, then you will be looking for low skilled, number of low skilled developers essentially will go up. So this thing, rigidity of hiring rates, if it becomes more rigid, number of low skilled developers will grow. And if quality of candidate selection process is high, then of course this is going to be opposite. So see, direct and opposite, but essentially getting here. We can map this further, but this is really not in the direction I would like to go. So this is really just a little thought process around budgeting and finance. There are, of course, the arrows that go out from here to products in, existence of real product definition. This is what I need to expose. In fact, I would like to make these very thick arrows because, yeah, it's just like you write something on a whiteboard, taking a white, making it very thick. Hey, pay attention to this causation. So this is the, it's like an income and outgoing, right? 2 arrows. It's like a horse and carriage. And there are many examples in the system where there's a horse and carriage. Positive feedback loops, as we call them. One goes up, another goes up. It's like a vicious cycle. Could be in a good way, could be in a bad way. This is actually in a good way. And by the way, my teal color is like a eureka of green. It's like, oh my God, it's so great. So if you don't have a real product definition, if it's low, simple question, how can you budget a product if you don't have one well-defined? It just doesn't happen that way. Hold on, folks. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I was afraid I might share it. Yes. There's a blue line around. My apologies. Caught myself off guard. Okay. So not having a real product definition will make product funding impossible. And the flip side is true too. If we're not funding a product, then how can we, maintain a good and strong product definition? Somewhere down there, we have another outgoing causation, likelihood of funding product teams. So first of all, if you have a product well-defined, then you should have long-lived product teams also well-defined. If we trace this arrow all the way up here, we shall see that healthy Scrum dynamics, such as cross-functional, long-lived, self-managed feature teams, this is going to go up as well. So we may start challenging ourselves. Why can't we have this? Why can't we have this? Why would you have this? Why would you have this if you don't have this and this? I mean, why would you expect from yourself? What's the driver for you to have cross-functional feature teams if you don't have a lot of, motivation? Well, you don't have a good reason to build features. So one leads to another. Let me slightly shift gears and talk about norms and this is one of my favorite ones, actually. HR norms and policies. So I'm going to actually trace the dependency on cascading top-down fixed year budgets. I'm not sure how much you know about the history of budgets, at least in the United States, at least in large corps. But I'm not going to be covering this today, but take a look at the Payment of Bonus Act of 1965. There's some good history you can trace back. I'm going to, first of all, who knows what's an IPA? It's one of these.
I'm a fan, Jim.
Yeah, I bet you would like to go to the left, right, and get the bottle, and I would too. But it is sad that IPA also stands for this. So I'm going to pause for another few seconds so you can absorb it. And this is why individual performance appraisal here is marked, at least for me, it's orange. It's like an extension of this function of toxicity. So it's not even red, it's worse than red. So again, if you read a bit of history about the Payment of Bonus Act, and if you also understand that many organizations have this strong prevailing belief that if there is no appraisal, there is no performance. If these two variables are well understood, then you will understand why. If they are increased, your individual performance, HR emphasis on individual performance is going to grow. Before I go further to the right, I'm going to expand on this. Amount of time and effort spent on IPAs will be high. I bet many of you have worked or still work for organizations that do this thing, right? Pretty harmful, pretty toxic. So this is one of the examples of, I'm a little fast, organizational waste. Percentage of overall organizational waste. This is a very wasteful process, very expensive, and keeps lots of people busy, spends lots of time and energy, and it's very frustrating and also demoralizing. And of course, it's not an easy pill to swallow. Many organizations push back on the idea of not having IPAs because that's what creates an illusion of them controlling people. And that's what gives them an opportunity to share discretionary money at all levels. And as I'm sure you know, for large orgs like banks, at a certain level, base salary means almost nothing. It's the bonus that pays their bills. So removing bonuses from senior executives essentially means, well, they're back to a different payment level. But of course, you can't just give bonuses to some people and not others, because that would be discrimination. So everyone gets a bonus, and it creates an illusion. Hey, it's a part of our ecosystem. That's how things have been done around here. We cannot live without those. So what can IPAs lead to? Internal competition and rivalry. I'm not sure if you agree or disagree. Yeah, Lucy's thumbs up, and I'm sure others feel the same way. If I am on the same team with any one of you and I'm being told by my manager, hey, Gene, it's either you or them, someone has to be a high performer, and I'm doing bell-shaped curve on you, all of you. Underperformers overachievers, you choose what you want to be, Gene. I want to be an overachiever. I want to be better than David or Kasha or Meenakshi, whatever else. So I won't be necessarily the best team player. Sorry.
Gene, I got a question for you that could be tabled.
Yep.
So I've seen organizations try to move away from individual bonus to team bonus, thinking that they're getting a little bit, I guess, away from this IPA. Have you ever seen so that's just one kind of piece. Have you ever seen an organization that actually has been successful in actually moving away from a large organization that was under bonuses to actually doing something different? And what was that different?
Yeah, maybe it's something we need to discuss in a tabled way. I can't drop names, but I've seen some banks implicitly do it. So you don't necessarily have to say we abolish performance appraisal system because it's toxic and demoralizing. But at a certain organizational level, you may send a right message down below. Folks, I pay attention to certain behaviors and certain actions from you. And I am in control of the budget, and I will be incentivizing those people that demonstrate right behaviors. Now we're going to still feed the beast and fill in that system of record with whatever it's requiring us to do for HR purposes. But so you usually do this at a certain organizational level where you control the budget. Of course, there's a myriad of organizations that abolish this process. I would recommend reading the book by Jarty Bogsnes, Beyond Budgeting. And he shares a lot of information on that. He also gives some great references. So yeah, ping me offline if you would like. I can point you to the sources.
Okay, thank you.
And this is, by the way, here, right there, there's another system variable. Team synergy and stability could increase. And this is my subjective way of doing this, thick or thin. Thick arrows mean just very strong causation. A delayed effect, this is a double pipe here, annotation. Emphasis on team performance will have a positive effect on team synergy and stability. Peer-to-peer support, this is obviously has to go. Peer-to-peer support is going to lead to motivation to learn from each other and learn and teach each other. So complementary skills. Willingness to learn from each other. So this kind of maybe a little too fragmented, but just so that you hear the language and it feeds back on the team synergy. Aaron, I'm going to take you in a second. I see your hand raised. And if you were to trace this out further, likelihood that cascading top-down bonuses will drive employees' behavior. If you trace this up and up and up and here, you will actually see that pressure to game numbers is going to grow as well. So likelihood that cascading top-down bonuses will drive employees' behavior. It will essentially lead to this game of numbers and further into measurement dysfunction growth and further to the decrease of our ability to guide this system. So historically and scientifically proven that HR norms and policies are very tightly coupled to budget and finance. Budgets, compensations, HR norms and policies are tied at the hip. And of course, if you work for organizations that are in the business of agile, fill in the blank, transformation, adoption, journey, blah, blah. If you do not consider HR norms and policies and budgeting finance as a part of your agile improvement efforts, day one, phase one, cycle one, you're probably going to be spinning lots of wheels and creating an illusion of improvements. And by the way, if you hear something like this, we're going to tackle this in wave 3. I have a suspicion that it's coming from people that are going to be most likely not around at phase 3. They will use agile bandwagon or jumpstart to promote their careers up to a point where they need to actually tackle serious stuff and move on before that. But since we talked about budget and finance and its coupling to product centricity and product focus, I can tell you these two relationships, well, actually it's one relationship, income and outgoing, is very, very strong. And what we can do also, we can trace existence of real product definition further into the number of so-called products. And I can probably walk out on them and say, forgive my friends, bullshit products, not real products, applications, infrastructures, frameworks, shared services, platforms, pretty much anything you name it would be called as a product, just because we want to be consistent with agile ways of working, because this is the trendy thing now. But this thing, if this is high, it's going to have a strong opposite effect. And I want to make this even bigger. Oh, but I can't now because it's all not magnified. Yeah, I want to make it big, important. So it's going, yeah, a little kludgy. I'll fix it later, but you get the drift, right? It's the opposite effect on opposite causation on the number of so-called products. But this by itself is also orange. It's my extension of redness. If this variable grows in value, then the number of so-called product backlogs, strongly caused, will also grow. And we can start, tracing this out to local optimization by single function specialty team, component team, and BAs playing a role of a team level proxy PO and some other dysfunction we see a lot in the system. And I'm happy to take you down this path because this is just a larger ecosystem. But I'm going to pause for two reasons. A, I don't want to be monotonic, and B, at least there's one question coming from Aaron. Aaron.
Yep. Oh, great. No, great talk and presentation so far. Thanks. So I think industry structure and what segment you're in plays a big role. I mean, I work, pretty much with industrial companies. I've done that probably 2/3 of my career. And I find that there's a much more, value stream, value to product to customer centricity. It has to be, right? Because you have to be producing something for somebody that's paying for it, or else why are you making it, right? I mean, there's a very tight window there. And I think in other industries where you get a lot of, let's say, market, when I say market, like market structure driving a lot of the individual compensation and individual performance, it starts to skew kind of all the behaviors, and you could take, financial services is like, I think a sort of a poster child example of that, right? And, so I think I've seen that that's a big differential, I would say, in terms of those practices. I don't know what your experience is or your feelings on that are, but it's something I've just constantly, it's hard to be bad HR very long in a good industrial company. It's just not going to last. There's just going to be a collision there, and the HR is going to lose. They're going to put industrial people in those roles, and they're going to map up to need on the plant line to the customer, to customer quality and value.
So Aaron, you by the way, this is the board that folks, everyone should have access to, and feel free to around it. Your point is very valid and very, again, so we all bias. And when we do system modeling, we're also biased. Our understanding, if you do this as a group of 2 to 6 people together at the whiteboard or on a Miro board, you're going to be still biased, individually as a group. But I strongly agree with you. So I'm biased the same way you are. And this is probably somewhere. So it's an objective way to look at the system. So not every company is the same. Not every industry is the same. When we do these system models, when we apply system thinking, we apply it to a system, and not every system is the same. And it does matter which company we are modeling for within, and it does matter which industry we're doing this with. So, and I've done my share of work for large organizations, for large banks, where, like you said, it's a foster child of the problem, right? And I've done some work for smaller, like boutique firms, product companies, where but most of the described dysfunction would not be tolerated, because they have no right, not financial, not morally, to waste their time and energy and money. So, for example, if they pay out discretionary incentives, most likely they will be doing this. Even if they do this to individuals, it would be on something that is much more measurable and objective, and more likely would be based on team performance. And more likely there will be funding of a real product, and you will be mapping cash flow and a return on investment of that product. And less likely you will be stuck in the debris of projects, programs, and portfolios. So I agree with you.
Yeah. And just one last quick thing is that in industrial, which is hundreds of industries, very few organizations are their own contained value stream, right? So there's just this massive network effect across all of those componentry organizations. And so it just drives a lot of, it seems to be like that's the HR system in some ways, if that makes any sense, because like that drives everything to the customer order and customer value and the margin behind it.
I agree. The closer, the better proximity we have between Gemba,
that's what I was going to say,
where value gets created and where it gets consumed, the less space and opportunity, there's going to be less oxygen for BS.
Yeah.
So, and we can naturally we would not be able to tolerate it. For a large organization like a bank, like an investment bank, when there is a huge gap between Gemba and value consumption, with many layers and levels, and and X roles, now agile same roles, right? It's like a tiramisu cake, layered cake. This is much more probable because they're in a relabeling business for the most part.
Yeah, and people seem to not be comfortable talking about things like your mudas, like your wastes. They're just they kind of squish in their chair. Whereas in industrial organizations, anything you can point out, it's like, oh, really? Like, can you show that to me? Do you have the data? I mean, there's just a different mindset around the 7, 8, 9, 10 waste, however many number you want to call it. But, it's just a different mentality.
That's right. Absolutely. I agree. They're not in business of fiddling around.
Yeah,
they can't afford. Exactly. Their credibility is on the line. And in fact, maybe the way they do their economics is different, and the way they do their budgeting is different. We always joke about this. Large organizations can't afford waste because they make too much money. Take any large investment bank, it just actually makes too much money to support their back office and operational overhead and waste. It's designed that way. It's like a big elephant, small elephant. It eats more grass, it grows bigger, eats more, grows bigger. It gets to a point where it needs to eat a lot. So.
Yeah, and the last, sorry, is that there does tend to be, I've seen just consistently in industrial organizations, this connection between process cycle efficiency, your budgets, like you're going to get more budget because you're driving more efficiency, because that efficiency is directly linked to obviously producing more of what the customer wants better, blah, 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 blah. And just a different, and if you're not linked in that chain, it's sort of like, who cares really in some ways.
Yeah, in industrial companies, the degree of measurement dysfunction is much lower.
Exactly.
And therefore, ability to guide the system is much higher. Take any large investment bank with all of these systems they have in place, tools of record, tracking, registry, the degree of dysfunction, the measurement is quality and accuracy are extremely low.
Yeah.
But they cost a lot.
Yeah.
They can afford
and if you're honest about it, the financial organizations on average are rent seeking, right? They're basically leveraging external capital for their CapEx cycles that are rent seeking from their, whereas industrial companies are on these longer plant and equipment life cycles, and they have to make these really good bets, and they have to prove them in, and they have to be linked,
I would tend to agree. Also, large organizations, large banks, fintech are very good at relying on external large consultancies to come in and tell them what's the best thing to do, and then walk away in 2-3 years and leave them in ashes and disaster at $65-70 million. But no one's going to take responsibility for that. I mean, you can blame the large consultancy, but internal people will not take ownership. So folks, this is an open conversation at this point. Feel free to chime in, ask questions, comment.
Hey, Gene, question.
Yes, Lucy?
Can you expand a little bit on what you're saying about Gemba?
Oh, Gemba. It's more of, it's a language thing. So it's somebody speaks Japanese, correct me. It's Genshu Genbutsu sounds in Japanese. And it's where value gets created, where action takes place. So think of like Toyota production system, the assembly line where the cars get assembled. Gembas would be at the factory floor. So if something happens there, like managers would come down there and then immediately try to stop and fix. So Gemba is where value gets. So developers machine is Gemba, right? And the customer, a paying customer, or an internal user that uses their product would be, where Gemba creation gets consumed. So, and you want to flatten your org and bring your people much closer to each other. Gemba people, yeah.
The user to the producer of value, the customer.
Yeah, exactly. You want to flatten that structure. So if you have many layers of translation, levels, layers, levels, we are humans. We get lots of information gets scattered and lost in translation. In fact, many organizations are very, that's why I was sharing this graphic. They're very good at just renaming old levels into new levels just by adding the word agile to it without really changing much. Another graphic that maybe illustrate the same is this with respect to budgeting. So you got projects, by component teams, many velocities to program velocities, portfolio, some enterprise, huge number. And then you do this cascading down, traditional budgeting down. It's like you're using a new fancy word, velocity, but you're essentially doing the same good old thing, bad old thing. So that's what makes metrics, vanity metrics, and so less reliable.
And the magic in Gemba is going through this walk where you just are asking whys and sort of proving, and you don't need fancy stuff. You just a pad and pen. I mean, you don't need 12 SaaS apps or any of this stuff. It's just you're sort of discovering
precisely
what actually is valuable where it's produced. So it's the factory floor, or it's the unit of space that actually generates the value is where you do that Gemba walk on, and you're constantly trying to sort of hone it and tune it. It's almost like a chef, really, or a chef that cares, right?
Sure.
That wants to keep making a better, doesn't ever stop making a better version of whatever that is.
Very true, Aaron. And this, the flip side is unfortunately true too. The opposite of that would be managers not walking around and checking out the Gemba, what happened in the floor. Them relying on metrics and fancy reports and rags. And God knows, I won't be dropping names, of course, but some organizations are intoxicated. They drool and salivate over these tools that have these plugins and mechanics that to produce metrics and reports. And like whether it's Rally or Jira with Jira Align, it's like the fanciest drug I've ever seen in the market. So, or version 1 and VSTS, the more layers you got, the more fancy your reporting is, the higher probability that this variable is going to be growing exponentially. But organizations pay lots of money for that because it feels right. It feels normal. That's what we have been doing around. It used to be Microsoft Project Plan, but now we use Jira Align and Jira, Portfolio Manager or Rally Admin Portfolio Manager. So systemically, but it all boils down to, again, not to lose sight of this product centricity. So if we work for a product organization, or if our organization says it is a product organization, you would be expecting certain behaviors, because you can trace it further into likelihood that a real product owner can prioritize and control budget. If you don't have a real product, how can he or she how can they do that? So these two are very tightly coupled. And I didn't want to make this story system model too busy, but budgeting capability by a product owner would be mapped back into budgeting and finance. The way you do your budgeting and finance, it would be also mapped into HR. Why? Because if your product owner is not properly positioned organizationally, a.k.a. not ranked high enough, then they would not be given an opportunity. They would not be given a right to manage budget. Senior BA playing the role of PO, just creating an illusion of being a priority person, cannot control budget. You need to go 2 or 3 levels up, perhaps, and then. So that's an HR question. So if you think this person is a great PO at the BA level, put him up there, give him money. But that's not the way we do it. So related to HR norms and policies. From here all the way up to there. Any other thoughts, questions? Again, this is a conversation about the system. Does anyone feel that, hey, there's some flaws, or maybe I think differently? It's Vegas. What happens here stays here.
No, when I'm looking at this, Gene, hi, this is Vince.
Hey, Vince.
I think the biggest issue I see is kind of like what you were mentioning earlier. We kind of Oprah Winfrey our products and say, hey, I have 5 people reporting to me. So you get a product, you get a product, you get a product. Next thing you know, there's 5 products because I have 5 people reporting to me. I think that the issues that I've seen in the industry where they misunderstand, I guess, this the most is really around the product definition. And what is a real definition of a product?
You know what? As a sidetracking note, as a side note, I will share with you a bunch of templates that may potentially be useful to you. Just grab them and ask me questions afterwards if you would like. Constraining, expanding, and restraining questions to define your product canvas, and other things. But to your point, I just pinged it in the chat room. But to your point, the biggest statement I usually make, at least when I teach some of this stuff, it really matters who you ask. Who you ask matters a lot when you define a product. You really should be asking those people that pay for a product or use a product. So this is kind of natural. If you ask a few architects and project managers and program and portfolio managers how they define it, they will use it. They could use a completely different way to describe it than if a customer does it. So you can totally hit or miss here. Who you ask really matters. And speaking of product-centric discussions and product-centric workshops, this is a huge must for, at least in Scrum, in large-scale Scrum. In large-scale Scrum, it's a huge effort, or it's like one of the zero-based priorities. 0, educate everyone. 1, define your product. And it may take you from a few weeks to a few months. Before you know what your product is, it will be hard for you to know how to structure teams that are product-centric. And you can still develop a product in an old-fashioned way with a bunch of component teams heavily integrated and coordinated through managers and managers of managers, integration managers, correlation managers, coordination managers, release managers, fancily called, release train engineers, release plane engineers, release boat engineers, you name it, right? Well, anyway, thoughts, questions?
One thing that I think is interesting is it seems, because how industrialized technology development has become, that you have a lot of capacity that just seeks effort. And so that starts to just, in some ways, almost manipulate demand. And so there becomes this whereas I think in a prior era where you had, you could, whether it was enough or a line to write, whatever you could say, there was always more stress on the supply side of what we'd call technology development, et cetera. And then there was so much demand. And so you couldn't try to do everything, right? You had to sort of pick, and there was, to some degree, I think, some decent prioritization back then, because there were just some things that were much more important or existential to the organization. In some ways, it feels that right now we're sort of in this weird stage of flipping this, where everyone is working in tech in a company, and everybody, it's almost like the way the world moved from pre-PCs, when everyone did so much stuff that was manual, and then they got like a desktop in the 80s and into the 90s before sort of laptops took off, and everyone had Office, or everything was a spreadsheet, and literally everyone just spreadsheeted everything, and it didn't matter if it had any purpose to be spreadsheeted. It's just like you put it in a spreadsheet. And there's sort of 1000x version of that, I feel right now, when I just see these projects, because I'm just sort of like, why are you improving CXs for underlying applications no one uses? Like, who cares?
Yep. Look, if you ask me, and this is, I don't want to be, again, monopolizing this conversation. I think over time, over years, companies have gained more confidence that they can spend funds less wisely, especially in certain sectors. And what's meant to be something totally different, like adaptive product development, what it used to be back in 2001 and even earlier, and what it is being perceived as today, it's just like a so different. All right, folks. Any other questions, maybe from others or comments? We got a couple minutes remaining. It's just a system model to help us.
Steven's hand is up.
Sorry, Mal?
Hello. Sorry, my hand was up. I was just giving you time to talk before I jumped in real quick.
Sure.
First of all, I love the colors because it helps draw my eye. So thank you for giving me that tip. I think I'll figure out a way to make that work. Secondly, it sounds like you're saying that the way we do budgets, which is the use it or lose it bit, is part of that toxicity in being able to move forward and move better. And we should just be thinking about what do we need as opposed to who cares what we did last year. We just need to figure out what we need to do this year based upon having that good definition of a product, which leads to the correct funding. Is that what you're showing in this model, if I got that right?
Yeah, sure. So, well, first of all, color coding again. If you're comfortable with my subjective way to do this, great. You may develop your own way to visualize it, but nevertheless, to your question about budgeting. So again, this whole system here is to help us understand cause and effect relationship, not necessarily prescribe or mandate understanding this is right and this is wrong. That's why if you notice, none of these variables are written as bad or good or high or low. Just very few, like low skill developers, just very few of those. We usually keep them neutral so that we can upgrade, this attribute can be changed in value, high or low, so we can adjust it. So let's just assume for a minute that, where is it? Where's this thing? The benzene. Huh? So assuming that burning cash at the end of the year is not a bad thing. If it is a good thing, then let's see what happens. So the whole idea behind system modeling is to have a conversation. Now, of course, we're all, common sense is telling us don't burn cash just for the heck of it. But through the system, and if you understand a little bit about budgeting, like fiscal year end budgeting, you would know that those managers that control budget, they would like to spend it in X year. So in X plus 1 year can justify why they need as much or maybe a little more. Because their manager will say, well, I give you $1 million, we spend only 700,000 in this year. Why would I give you $1 million next year? Because it's fixed. It's not a give and take. It's not like, hey, we have flexible budgeting. If you need it, take. There's like maybe a range where you need to sit, but not necessarily fixed. So it's really not a problem for every company, but for many companies.
Right. I didn't mean to imply that you were giving a statement of fact. I just meant that it sounded like that's what the model is showing. And you're right. If your intent is to blow through money, then if that's the goal, then this is the way to do it. But if you're looking to empower people, it feels like forcing them to be locked just felt wrong. So I understand what you meant. I'm sorry if I
No, you did well. You're good. And by the way, if you were to budget in a dynamic, in a cascading way, like maybe at least every quarter, every month you would revisit, then you wouldn't need to do this. And by the way, this is another conversation. We don't have time for this. Budgeting, funding, like at least in large scale Scrum, budgeting 50, 60 developers 2 to 8 teams becomes super easy because you know exactly how much people get paid, you know, plus minus a small increase perhaps, times the number of people, times the number of, you know, bing from bank to bullets. That is if your teams are stable, long-lived, and product-centric, and you don't disassemble teams every few months because you have a new project. So that aspect of budgeting becomes extremely, extremely simple. Not totally simple, much simpler. And of course, it depends on you funding a product and cash flowing through that channel. So folks, I know we're out of time and I know people will start dropping, some of them already dropping. Thank you all for joining. I will inspect this board, see if you wrote anything there. If not, not a big deal. I will share with you, the recording will be available soonish. We'll make this available here. Let me ping you this link. Like on this link, I'll add some other links to like product definition canvases and templates, stuff that you could use perhaps. And, you know, we'll look for another opportunity to get together. And of course, drink lots of good IPA if you can, but try to avoid doing IPAs. Those are harmful. Thank you all for joining. I'm gonna wrap this up now. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and be safe.
Thanks, Gene.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gene.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Gene.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gene. Awesome.
All right, thank you very much. Have a great one. Bye-bye.